Upset alerts for week 6. We like to put the upset alert meter. We like to give a 1 to 10 rating on these things. How concerned am I on these games? And I've got one for you. We didn't talk about this one the other night at all because I wanted to save it for Thursday. Clemson is at Florida State Saturday night. Clemson is favored by a little over 2 touchdowns, about a 14.5-point favorite over at FanDuel right now. Brock Glenn is getting the start. So I know it's Cocktober for those of you up in Columbia who root for South Carolina, but it is also sort of low-key Brocktober, hopefully, for the folks down in Tallahassee. Cade Klubnik, quarterback at Clemson, of course, been a little different player on the road throughout his career than he has been at home. So I've got a little concern here. It's a 7, which is a little bit higher than a 2-touchdown spread would normally indicate. I'm a little bit concerned about the potential for an upset here. I don't think Florida State is just totally dead, buried, and gone. There's going to be some little blip on the radar screen at some point this year. No, I do not count the Cal game, where they show a little more life than you, me, Meemaw, and Jesse and Colin, anyone else thinks they have. This is a total last resort moment. You're looking to restart your season if you're Florida State. All your preseason goals are out the window. You're looking to restart your season. And the impression that everyone's gotten of you is you're dead, buried, and gone, and Clemson is surging. But is Clemson surging? Maybe. They've beaten App State, they've beaten NC State, and they've beaten Stanford. Something starts to happen sometimes in college football where in your mind you start to think something, but you don't really fully evaluate why you think it. I, much like the rest of you, think Clemson is trending up heavily. But where have the tests come from? Where has the true road game come from? The answer is, That doesn't mean they're not good. That just means that there could be some things here that we're overinflating a little bit. So when I have an overinflated asset against a heavily devalued asset, then it stands to reason that we want to pay attention to this. And also, here's what's crazy. Florida State's 114th in turnover margin, so any given game, if that flips, and then you mix in the home field, because these folks still want to root for something down there, crazier things have happened. And the other thing that I just want to remind you of is every year, about this time, there are teams that you've given up on. I do it just as well. And then you come December, look back, and you say, had I known that this team had some kind of second life about itself, and I would have blindly just started betting them in October, I would be a rich man. Well, no, you wouldn't. They probably wouldn't have limits where you can bet high enough, but I do still agree that those exist. And I'm going to do something that's probably braver than anything we've done on this show. I am not only going to talk about this stuff, and I'm not only going to say I'm putting a 7 on the upset alert scale here. I am betting Florida State plus 14.5 over at FanDuel. In fact, I did it right before we came on air. And I am adding them as a Ramen Noodle Express best bet. Because somehow, some way, Brock Glenn is going to find a way. Somehow, some way, Clemson is going to be just subpar enough on the road. And somehow, some way, this is going to be a fight in the fourth quarter to where we can profit off of it. Florida State plus 14.5 is added to the Ramen Noodle Express. I'm not picking the outright upset. That's not what we're doing here. I'm just saying I'm watching it closer than I think the average college football citizen is watching it. Next up, we talked about this game Tuesday night. I'm going to revisit it. Ole Miss is at South Carolina. This is the start of Cocktober. And not only is it the start of Cocktober, South Carolina is coming off a bye. Now, we do have, this early in the season, we already have the transitive property factor in play here. What we mean by that is simply, we've got South Carolina hosting Ole Miss. Both of them have already played a common opponent. Both of them have already played Kentucky. Kentucky got blown out by South Carolina, 31-6. Kentucky just went and they beat Ole Miss at home. They beat them in the Grove last week. So, does that matter? Usually not, but things are there that you can learn from. Big question around South Carolina, will Lenora Sellers play? My guess is he will. My guess is you'll see Robbie Ashford as well. My guess is kind of like my guess with the A&M game, in that even if Wegman's healthy and ready to go, we will still see Marcel Reed. We may even see him start. So I don't know exactly what the starting rotation will look like here, but I still think there are some things Robbie Ashford can do that will warrant him playing in this game. Ole Miss is a tempo, pace-based offense. They have not seen it yet at South Carolina. LSU did not do it to the degree that they will. So if they can extend some drives and also can neutralize, to a degree, South Carolina's pass rush, that's optimal. It is a total do-or-die moment for Ole Miss. And I mean that. Like, this is it. Their season is virtually done if they don't win this game. Because I don't think Ole Miss has the kind of schedule where you could bake in losses to Kentucky and South Carolina in the resume and still have them in the postseason. Now, that stands to wait and see what the rest of the field looks like. But the goals were very clear for Ole Miss. So it sounds like I'm making a case for Ole Miss. I am. I think they're going to win the game. My concern level is a 7 here, only because they haven't been in a true road environment. And there are some difference makers on that South Carolina defense. And not to mention, Kentucky held you to 17 last week at home. So, maybe they were an overvalued asset in their own right. I'm going to put a 7 on the concern meter and just watch it. I'm not putting anything on it. Next up, this is a game that I think is off of most people's radars. It should not be because, it's a conference game and all. USC at Minnesota. Hit the rewind button. Let's just pretend it's 2006. And I just said that sentence out loud. USC at Minnesota is a conference game. Pretend it's 2016, and I say that. I'm still crazy. Well, here we are. USC, we track this sort of thing. They are the 4th most traveled FBS team in the last 4 weeks. They've been all over the place. So, Minnesota last week kind of sort of got screwed. Even the officiating had to come out and all but admit we screwed them out of a shot to win a game. And so you'd look at them a lot differently had they not. But in reality, they're no different a team. Here's the problem. This is not a great matchup for USC. I'm just telling you. Here's problem number 1. Kind of. Minnesota has the best pass defense statistically in the Big Ten. However, that's with Michigan and Iowa and North Carolina minus their quarterback baked in. So Minnesota probably does not have the best pass defense in the Big Ten. But they got a good one. They got a good enough one. Let's put it that way. That's number 1. Number 2, they are 16th in pressure rate. So they can get after the quarterback. And number 3, slow starts have been a chronic problem for USC this year. It's been the case in several weeks now. And number 4, with Bear Alexander gone, there is one USC defensive lineman that weighs over 300 pounds. Minnesota is 310 or heavier across the offensive front. So if they get their kind of quicksand game, if USC cannot sting them early, then they can quickly be drug out in the deep end where they have no interest in being. I have concern here. I've got it at an 8 on my upset alert concern meter. I am worried. Look at my hand. It's shaking a little bit. And this one's fine. This one's shaking a little bit. That's the West Coast hand there. Next up, speaking of the West Coast, it's been a lot of really interesting artwork that has been put forth in advance of this game. I've been victimized by it. The Calgorithm got to me. So we've got Miami at Cal. Good old-fashioned woke versus Coke matchup here. Miami's favored by 10.5. I've got a 6 on the upset alert scale. Had Miami taken care of business against Virginia Tech, it would probably be higher. In some ways, that was the wake-up call. You never like to see a more talented team get the wake-up call before they play you. And so we've got that factor. We got Miami's equipment truck. I was looking at them. I was tracking their journey out west. They were stopped somewhere in Texas. They had already logged 1,300 miles. They had like 1,800 more to go. It is a tough situation when you've driven 1,300 miles and you are not halfway to your destination. But this is conference football. This is ACC conference play here. It's what we all wanted. Miami was bad against Virginia Tech. They were undisciplined. They gave up yards after yards after yards to a Virginia Tech team that had struggled to move the ball. Cal's rested. Miami's got 1 day's extra rest, but they're also traveling. I just flat out think Miami's going to go out there and out-athlete Cal. That's what I think will happen. I do not have as high an upset alert concern grade here. I've got a 6 on it. And that's mainly because of the external dynamics, the travel dynamics. Because if they were playing this in like Kansas City or New Orleans or something like that, I wouldn't have it on my radar. Think Miami's going to be good here. Think they'll be okay here. But we'll see. Because I thought that about the game against Virginia Tech too. Baylor's at Iowa State. Why are we even talking about this game? Iowa State favored by 11.5. I'm going to put a solid 6.5 on the upset alert concern meter here. Baylor feels dead. I know they do. Maybe they're not. They look dead in the water. Coming off that Colorado last-second loss, they laid down against Brigham Young early, but then they got up and almost came back and won the game. I think most people had tuned out by then if you were watching it to begin with. Iowa State, number 1 defense in the Big 12, but they have not faced any kind of legitimate passing threat yet. This will be the first one. Baylor's quarterback, 324 and 4 touchdowns against Brigham Young last week, mainly in a come-from-behind effort. So like watching Carson Beck against Alabama, that's kind of the same vibe it was, but it counts. And also, if we're talking about the the matchup of an overinflated versus underinflated asset. You will never see people higher on Iowa State than they are right now, except for me, because I always am. And you will never see folks lower on Baylor than they are now. That's why that number's 11.5. Now it's 12.5. So I'm a little concerned, only because as much as I love Iowa State, I salute the American flag and the Sign-NATO flag every morning in that order. Are they ready to deal with prosperity? Are they ready? It's an open-ended question. They're free to answer it. I got a 6.5 on the upset alert concern scale there. And lastly, Rutgers is at Nebraska in the middle of the day Saturday. And Nebraska is laying anywhere from 6.5 to maybe 7 or 7.5. Who knows where this one closes? I am concerned. I've got an 8 on it. Now, the JP poll gives me the reason. We got Rutgers ahead of Nebraska. And so we think that this is right at an even game, may even slightly lean Rutgers an outright upset. That's what the model would think. I don't know that it's the best of matchups for Rutgers, but I think they'll be ultra competitive just because I think the team's good enough. So I'm stopping short of just sitting here outright saying, oh, give me Rutgers money line. Maybe it happens. It would make the model look good if it did. But Nebraska's got a top 15 run defense here. And I don't trust Rutgers to be able to throw the ball very effectively in this spot. So it's one of those games. Again, we've seen several of them all year. Quicksand special. Rutgers needs one. They are very adept at creating it. I'm going to put an 8 on the upset alert concern meter here. Rutgers is good enough to pull this off. Matchup-wise, I lean Nebraska. Rutgers is good enough to pull it off.